There are 3 things you need to know before I can start this video. Number 1, this will contain spoilers, but for the really big spoilers, like talking about the ending of the game, I'll try and give you a warning at the time. Number 2, anyone with a phobia of needles, avoid this game at all costs. And 3, I received a free review code from Striking Distance in order to do this review, and I've been doing some paid social media work for them. So I wanted to get my kind of disclosure out of the way, but I haven't been paid to make this video, but I did get the free review code. That said, according to the internet, in the past 24 hours, Striking Distance, the developers of the Callisto protocol, got literally everything wrong. It has been a war zone online. The amount of arguments that I've seen on Twitter, forums, YouTube, etc., just in the past day over this game have really surprised me, and I agree with a lot of the negatives, but I also want to share some of my own, and I agree with some of the positives. It's a kind of weird, complicated one, so buckle up because we're going to be diving into the weeds here. Just a quick insert to give a little disclaimer here that I do want this game to be good. Like, everything negative I say in this video does come from a place of love. I've literally worked with Striking Distance. I want the game to be as good as it possibly can be, and I want to try and help provide a critical but also fair eye to help spotlight and illuminate some of the things that are wrong and explain why they're wrong and what it is that they're missing or lacking, etc. Just in case there was any confusion. Zero ill will towards the devs. We'll talk more about that towards the end of the video, but this is all intended to be constructive. Please don't do any personal dev bashing or anything like that in the comments. Let's start by setting the scene. Development began on the Callisto protocol in 2019, and the intention was that it would be part of the PUBG universe. However, as time passed and the developers fought their way through the pandemic, they realized that the scope for it was bigger than PUBG, and so it's now its own thing, even though it does have 1 or 2 little sort of nods to PUBG that have remained. The dev studio is Striking Distance, and its publisher is Krafton. And a key detail of all of this is that it's very much an underdog story. Striking Distance have about 150 devs working there, and around 30 of them are either from Visceral, who made the original Dead Space game, or they're from Sledgehammer Games. That might seem like a weird combination, but the connecting factor there is Glenn Schofield. He's directed this new project just like he's done with many others, and he worked obviously on Visceral Games' Dead Space 1 and worked on Sledgehammer Games' Call of Duty World War II, for instance, and that game had a bunch of zombies in it as well. The World War II Zombies mode was this really twisted World War II alternate reality thing. So Glenn, moving on from that history of work, decided that he wanted to take what he'd learned and create a new 2022 version of a game like Dead Space. I'm sure he really isn't keen on people calling it Dead Space V2 or anything, because I'm sure that there's at least some discussion that's been had internally about whether there's any legal issues surrounding all of that. But from our perspective, it's absolutely a Dead Space game. It's just made by a new, fresh team in 2022 without the shackles of either EA or Activision holding any creative ideas back. And since its announcement, this is a game that people have been really rooting for. Glenn's quoted as having said, he set out with Dead Space 1 to make the scariest game of all time, and now he's saying it again with the Callisto protocol, so this game's gonna be terrifying. And people know that something incredible can come of the twisted ideas in this guy's head. And so there's been a lot of community excitement, and just everyone en masse, I think, have been really rooting for Striking Distance in the build up to this game. Fast forward all the way back from 2019 to now, 2022, and it's late November. I get my review code, I boot up the game, and start playing through it. The review embargo is the day of release, December 2nd. And already, off the bat, that's sort of a red flag. Maybe it's not fully red, maybe it's kind of the color of my background, but it's definitely not green. The reason for that is if you're proud of what your game has accomplished and what's on disc and ready to go, it's common practice for your review embargo to be a little before the game's release. That way you can get all of your glowing reviews out, people can go, oh, maybe I do want to buy that, and then it comes out with everyone jumping in together at the same time. Alternatively, if you're a little worried about the reception and you're trying to hide negative press coverage, then you make the review embargo as late as possible so that by the time people are already jumping into their waiting at midnight queues or moving to New Zealand to play the game early queues and receiving their pre-orders, the negative press kind of gets lost in the noise. So right from the outset, of those two options, Striking Distance and Krafton opted for the latter, which isn't an indictment of the game, but it's worth consideration amongst the rest of what I'm about to say. So you boot up the game, you get onto the main menu, you go into the graphics settings, and you notice, oh, sick, there's a performance option as well as a quality option. amazing. There's been a lot of controversy about that recently. Having a performance mode is pretty much essential in the view of 90% of gamers. So you're thrilled that that option's available and you start the game. The first thing you see is gorgeous. It's like this Japanese cyberpunk neon fusion city aesthetic, and it's so beautiful. And so straight away, you're going into this excited, thrilled that the product that you've just bought looks as spectacular as it does. And then the cutscene progresses and you start to see the characters' faces in the cutscenes, and you're awestruck all over again. How the hell have they managed to create faces that look this real, but are then still there and present outside the cutscenes when they transform into just real-time gameplay? And as events progress in the game, which we'll get onto in a second, you continuously, time and time again, have to take a second when you get into a new area, a new chapter of the game, a new play space, and you just have to gaze at it for a moment and drink it all in. I don't know exactly what kind of tricks, voodoo, black magic are being done behind the scenes here in order to create this absolutely stunning visual tapestry. But whatever the hell it is, it's working. The lighting feels like there's absolutely no pixelation on any of the shadows, the god rays, the volumetrics, the occlusion of it all. Oh, it's just so pretty. I don't think I remember a single point in the game where I looked at something, maybe some kind of texture was jumping out at me, and I was like, oh, it's a bit jagged. Oh, the aliasing there is really awkward. Like, I can see how jagged it looks, and it's creating this weird shadow, and the shadows block. None of that. From start to finish, this game is a visual masterpiece. And tragically, that's where the problems begin. You see, I said that they got everything wrong at the start of this video, that the internet had been shouting and screaming about how much they were disappointed with this game, and that might sound like it is in complete contrast to what I just said about the graphics. Well, sadly, a lot of folks weren't able to experience those beautiful graphics simply because they were playing on PC. I played the whole thing on PS5, and PS5, by all accounts, seems to be the most stable platform for the Callisto protocol at launch. On PC, even if you've got a very modern graphics card, an up-to-date CPU, all the newest drivers or old drivers, whatever kind of configuration you might have, the game is plagued by stuttering. I'd like to interrupt this little recording here with a message from the future. So in the time that I've been editing this video, they've updated the game, and there's a patch now that has improved a lot of performance issues for people on PC. So I'm gonna leave in what I originally said about the stuttering and the PC performance issues, because it was relevant at launch, and it is the state that the game launched in, and it is what reviewers had been playing with. But it has improved significantly now, so throughout this entire review, any mentions of stutter, aggressive performance issues, etc. should be taken with a grain of salt, because they apply to a version of the game that has since been improved massively. Credit to Striking Distance for getting on that so quickly. It's a shame that it wasn't ready for launch day, but such is life. These things happen, I get it. You'll be entering a new area, your game's gonna stutter. Something's gonna happen around you, game's gonna stutter. The FPS is also gonna fluctuate. Maybe you're in a scene with higher detail, more particles in the air, things like that. Expect that FPS to be trampolining around. And to be clear, that FPS fluctuation is separate to the stutter. When I say stutter, I mean the game literally freezing up for a moment. And according to a handful of reviews that I saw, one comes to mind specifically, SkillUp's review of it, which was really torn apart online by some people, which we'll get onto later. Those stutters also happened extremely often during jump scares in a horror game. So the game is jump scared just as much as you are, and can't catch up to the fact that some high motion activity, scene, etc. is meant to be happening, and so it just locks up while the scare happens, completely removing you from the experience. In a game where you also need to be able to react to things swinging at you constantly for the entire play session, if you're getting interrupted by those sorts of things, by stuttering or being thrown off by your frames dropping, it's really going to dampen the experience. So the graphics may be gorgeous, but if it's a slideshow rather than a moving picture, it obviously just doesn't have the same effect. Now, I realize I'm talking about the game from a quite zoomed out perspective here. I had better tell you a little bit about the story. If you don't want any story details, I'll have a timestamp on screen here so you can skip forward to afterwards. In the game, you play as Jacob, who is essentially a nondescript and uninteresting space trucker. He he's just doing a delivery in space at the beginning of the game when his ship gets attacked. And there's a mysterious girl who he's also just seen on TV who breaks into the ship, and while that's all happening, the ship actually begins to crash into the moon of Jupiter called Callisto. Hence the name. Once they crash land, Jacob and the girl, called Danny, are thrown into Black Iron Prison because Callisto has been turned into a prison moon, and it's inside and around that prison that the entire game's narrative takes place. Now, as you begin your escape, you also find that the jail has just started being overrun by zombies. Go figure. So you have to not only try and get out of the jail, but you also have to try and evade the hordes while you do so. The evil baddie who threw you in the jail in the first place is called Ferris, and he takes orders from and works for a mysterious guy that only seems to appear over hologram called Cole. Now, if I asked you what you thought a story might be if it took place in a prison during a zombie outbreak, what would you say? Like, if you could think of the most generic plot for something like that, what would it be? I'm just thinking right now, it would probably be something like, well, you try and escape, and as you do so, you realize that they've been turning the prisoners into zombies. That sounds like plausible stuff. And there's some kind of organization that runs it all, obviously. There has to be. And they maybe are doing the experiments on the prisoners because they want to turn them into super soldiers, or they're trying to perfect cloning or some similar thing to enhance the power of whatever that organization was that was doing the experimentation in the first place. I'm being really vague and generic here, obviously, but I just want to examine the tropes. If you wanted to go a little further, you could potentially say, well, they're doing it because they're at war and they're losing the battle, and so they're turning to more desperate things in order to try and find that Hail Mary solution, the panacea to their problems, in order to come back from behind and win that battle, whatever that battle may be. Maybe it's an intergalactic conflict, maybe it's much smaller, and it's just a fiscally driven arms race or something. And then if you wanted to push it even further than that, you might say that could be the front face of it all. Like if there's a corporation that just wants to maximize their profits, obviously they're going to do this. And if they can maximize those profits to help win a war and gain more power in whatever system they're operating, then absolutely they're going to want to do it. But cranking it kind of to 11, maybe someone that works high up in that organization isn't only interested in the money, but also either is being blackmailed into doing it by some other shadowy umbrella organization, corporation, or entity. Or maybe they themselves are part of that organization and they've got some kind of ulterior motive here. Like they're almost religious in their need to complete this work. And so they have got their sort of fingers pulling the strings of the puppets in getting this organization to do this experimentation, to create this virus or genetic code or serum or whatever in order to achieve these means. It's incredibly generic, and it could probably apply to 3 or 4 different things that you could think of right now. And sadly, it completely describes the plot of the Callisto Protocol. This game does absolutely nothing surprising. You're trying to break out, you meet a guy that also wants to leave. He's called Elias. He basically helps you open some doors for about 3 hours, and then spoiler alert, he dies. At his moment of death, the girl that you saw 3 or 4 hours ago in that opening sequence in the game just happens to show up again. She's been completely AFK the entire time, but as soon as one of your little helpers dies, she's back. And what purpose does she serve? Well, she basically opens doors for you for another 3 hours. Then at the very end of the game, in classic game with any kind of virus style, she gets infected. Oh no. And then the game's big boss fight is just you trying to get a serum to rescue her. And you succeed, but then there's only one escape pod. So you commit an act of selflessness because you are a good protagonist. And so you set her on her merry way in the escape pod while you stay behind to die or to attempt to fight off an infinite number of zombies. So that sounds generic, right? Let me showcase a couple more aspects of the game that are painfully generic. First off, the bad guy. There's sort of 2. There's Ferris and there's Cole. Ferris is the jailer dude who you have one scene with at the start of the game to get a kind of feel for why he might be powerful or why you might not like him. And he then ends up turning into an American football player, better described maybe as a kind of deflated version of Grey Hulk. And he then proceeds to try and punch you to death before transforming into what can only be described as a fairly similar boss enemy to the one that we all fought in Call of Duty World War II Zombies, which is more or less just a big pile of meat and human-looking stuff. He hardly has any time to talk to you. He hardly has any time to show any emotional depth. He pretty much has zero opportunity to explain his own personal motivation for things. He's more or less just doing what Cole has told him to do. And that brings us on to Cole. So he's a hologram through the entire game. He pops up here and there saying, change is important. You can't run away from your past forever. You must run towards it sometimes. Sometimes you must run towards the future. And similar tropey video game villain lines. In the final 10 minutes of the game, it's revealed that there's actually an organization which Cole is a part of who wear these spooky gold masks. They hide their identities. It's almost like they're some kind of religion. And they're obsessed with the idea of human evolution exceeding its current limits and allowing humans to become an intergalactic species instead of being one limited to our little tiny solar system. It's this search, this pursuit of human evolution that caused him to do all this experimentation on the prisoners to advance the agenda of this weird religious cult, who you only really truly get an understanding of or even begin to at the very end of the game. But it's fair to say that of what I just described of the story, there is really close alignment with some of the most generic tropes you can think of for a game like this. And that's why I said there are just no surprises. Oh, the guy that was mean to you at the start of the game turns into a big scary monster? Okay, I mean, there were no other characters in the entire game to fill that role, so of course he did. Oh, there's a character with a quirky British accent who says bruv a little bit too much. Oh, he dies right in the middle of the game. That actually makes total sense. There's no way they'd keep a character like that around forever. Oh, the girl at the start of the game who infiltrated your ship and was meant to be against you ends up on your side. Okay, I mean, fine. And in that opening cutscene of the game, when she's shown on TV and being purported to be a terrorist that attacked Europa, that turns out not to be true. Like, I don't need surprises to enjoy a story, nor do I need things to be completely novel. There are only so many types of story that exist, and not everything has to be Call of Duty Black Ops 1 or Spec Ops The Line. But for the love of God, if you've got 4 characters in your game, you'd better at least make them likable, make you want to root for someone, have the player embodied in someone maybe, so that when I see a character in the game doing something stupid or something heroic, there is a presence within the game that kind of aligns with what I'm thinking at the time. Like there's ludonarrative confluence, for lack of a better word, or something. Just let me get attached. Let me feel things. Instead, the Callisto protocol has absolutely no emotion in it. Right before our quirky British friend died in the snow in the middle of nowhere, I pretty much said, if I see this man getting eaten by monsters right now, I'm gonna be so sad. Not because I care about him, but just because he's useful. Now, I know that makes me sound like a sociopath, but the reality of the situation is the game gave me no opportunity to bond with that character. He was a murderer who regretted being a murderer. Okay. There was no real growth. He just said, I'm a murderer. And then he said, but I feel bad about it. Wow. He's a changed man, folks. It falls really flat. And this flatness, sadly, is amplified by certain things in the game which either don't make sense or at least don't feel like they make sense. Let me give you an example. Here in the game, my character, Jacob, radios in to his British buddy, Elias, to just check in with him. Here's what happens.
Look at the size of that thing. Elias, I'm in the elevator. I see the shoe.
And then there's some follow-up.
Elias, you there?
And a tiny bit more.
Elias, can you hear me?
About 10 seconds later, you open a door, and he's right there. And he says this. Okay, I guess it's just me now. Oh.
Sorry for not responding. This thing's found a way inside here. Really tearing up the place.
Now, while playing the game, I didn't understand why that had just happened. In fact, this is what I had to say about it. That's weird. Why did he just not respond? I feel like he said those things got in here or whatever, but there aren't any things in here, first of all. Second, there were like 10 seconds between me being out there and me being in here. And so it doesn't really make sense that he just didn't respond. I don't know. Something's weird with that guy. Something's a little weird. I've watched my footage back, and I still don't think it makes any sense. Like, both from a narrative point of view, just in the moment, and from a design perspective. Within the narrative, he's radioing in, and he's like, "You right, mate? You there? You there? Hello? You there?" Opens the door. "Oh, you right?" Does that move the narrative forwards? No. Does it tell us anything about the characters? No. Does it give us some information that we'd previously been missing? No. Does it contain any humor? No. Does it entertain the player somehow? No. Does it make sense for the characters to communicate in that way? No. And to expand on that last point, if you call your mate and say, "You right? You right? Hello? Yeah? Are you there? Hello?" And then you open the door and they're like, "Sorry, I was busy." But all they're doing is typing on a computer. You're absolutely gonna say to him, "Dumbass, I rang you 10 seconds ago." There is no way that an entire zombie outbreak just took place in this pristine, clean room, and that prevented you from answering the phone when I am 10 seconds out of getting here. I can see that you're not busy, dumbass. Why aren't you picking up? It just felt weird. And from a design perspective now, does it tell us something about Elias's character maybe? Elias didn't double cross us at any point. He was a goody two-shoes for his entire time in the game. And so the idea that the unusual communication mismatch going on here meant something actually fizzles out completely. That's just not right. So what else could it do design-wise? Well, maybe it's meant to try and make the player feel more scared because we're alone on the ship, but it definitely doesn't do that. Is it just audio to fill time for the sake of filling time? Well, what gameplay or design goal does that serve? I just don't get it. Maybe someone's going to comment a single sentence that explains this away. But the problem from my perspective is that when you're making a video game, there's a million different ways you can play a game, and there's a million different ways that a given player will pass through your experience. And as a designer, you need to account for all of those experiences to try and ensure that even if they do the weirdest path of those million choices, they still get the crucial narrative beats that they need in order to understand things. They don't feel like they're lost or confused or they're missing crucial info, etc. And what happened for me there is I just got confused, and it completely changed my framing of Elias as a character because there was so little of it being done prior. And so I was suspicious of him for the entire rest of the game until he died. And so actually, if anything, it led me barking up the wrong tree for an outcome that the game wasn't even trying to achieve. As a designer, you're going to want to try and avoid those sorts of things. Like, it's all well and good if it's intentional misdirection, but this wasn't misdirection. This was just, confusion. And I think you could say the same for that religious cult thing at the end. Like, they're there for such a small amount of time that players that play the game, I guarantee, are going to run through that last little bit, and then if you ask them, "So what was Vir Solaris?" they're going to be like, "What now? Who was the big bad enemy?" "Oh, it was the police warden guy, that Ferris guy." "Was there like a bigger organization like pulling the strings?" "Well, there was that other dude, that Cole guy, but he was just working with Ferris, and like that was it." Like, they're going to miss what feels like it's meant to be the grand reveal because you've given them 3 minutes or something of cutscene for it to sink in, and about 5 minutes of running through a corridor. And the police warden guy, Ferris, only shows up a couple times, so you hardly get to know him anyway. And that's the entire suite of characters, bar one doctor who conveniently radios into your ear from nowhere, having no business with you for the entire game, and says, "Oh, by the way, I can save you, and I'm just going to electronically open doors for you. So you can just leave your cell. You can just leave the building. You can leave the entire cell block. You can just get out." It's so frustratingly convenient. And this is a massive problem that the game has from beginning to end. Every single time something feels like it's regaining a little stability, the most obvious thing happens in order to disrupt that stability. So for example, you've met up with Danny and you're making a little bit of progress and you're climbing this metal structure. Of course the metal structure breaks. Of course she doesn't catch you and you fall. Of course you're climbing back up again and you fall again. There's about 4 or 5 times in the game where you just fall and you're like, "Oh, I'm underground again now. Okay." Of course, robots find you and they just don't kill you, but they throw you back into the jail cell from the beginning of the game, which I guess the designers had already constructed, so it saved on some resources. And then, of course, a random doctor just radios in and says, "Yeah, I'll sort you out, mate. Beep. Yeah, you're out the cell again." And again, I want to be really clear. It isn't a problem that the game is picking obvious twists and turns in its narrative, but it is a problem that that's all the game seems capable of. Like, I think it's fine for the outcome of a scene to be predictable. I don't actually think that that inherently is an issue, but when it's predictable and it's a bad choice, like it's actually not fun, or it's just annoying because it's been repeated a few times, or it feels unfair to the player, like you've worked for something and then it's just taken away again. Worked for something, taken away. Things like that, in my opinion, you've got to be really careful. Because if you aren't making any kind of risky moves in the narrative, if you aren't capturing the player's interest in the story in any way, then as soon as you start doing those things that are on shaky ground, the player's faith in you as a developer to deploy a story they care about or they might care about, the openness of the player's heart to connect with a character, that's going to shrivel up real quick. And this is something that starts to cross into gameplay, but we're going to keep it in the story kind of category for now. The world building in the game is awful. And it's weird because it's such a stark contrast with the fact that graphically, it's a masterpiece. But the things you are looking at are so weirdly uninteresting so much of the time. Like, I can count on one hand the number of times that I entered a room and thought, oh, I wonder what was happening here. Like, at one point, there's a guy that's dead inside a little cell. And I remember in my playthrough, I was like, oh, he's in a cell. I wonder what happened there. And that's something that other games in this genre and across video games in general over the years have gotten really damn good at doing. Maybe you're in a space and you see a body hanging from the roof and his parachute's tangled up in there, but then there's a blood stain on the floor, which makes it look like he's been dragged over there and then strung up, as opposed to just falling there and getting his parachute tangled. Okay, that's interesting. You start to develop a story for what might have happened in your head. This game basically does the opposite 90% of the time and says, okay, well, we've got an area here and it's going to have spikes in it. Why is it going to have spikes? Well, those are useful for gameplay. And there's going to be bodies here and there, but those bodies don't particularly tell a story. They just sort of look like they're there. And this is definitely going in the gameplay direction, and I'll talk about this more later. But when you do get curious about something, maybe something catches your eye, most of the time, you follow that little bit of curiosity, get there, and feel disappointed once you do. But to truly explain what I mean by that, we're going to have to start talking about the gameplay, and I want to begin that section of this video focusing on combat. The combat system is perhaps this game's biggest error, its most grievous mistake. But to really feel why that's the case, I don't think you can just look at a 5-second clip and go, oh yeah, that does look bad. Because a lot of it is about feel. At its most bare bones simplified level, encounters with enemies work in the following way. They stumble over to you, and then they swing, and maybe they swing twice. And during each swing, you need to be holding to the side on your controller. Now, I'm going to give you a visual demonstration of this, not because I think you're an idiot and you don't know how a controller works, but because it's going to be relevant in a moment. But please bear with me here. It's your left analog stick that needs to go to the side. So let's say zombies running towards you, and it's about to swipe you. You just hold to the side, and that's going to cause your character to automatically dodge the attack. There is no skill check. There is actually no skill to this whatsoever. You just have to be holding to the side, and when the attack comes in, you'll dodge out of the way. Now, where the skill is intended to come in is the fact that once you've dodged in that direction, you can't dodge in that direction a second time in a row. You have to go from holding to the left for the first attack, for example, to holding to the right for the second attack. And so you end up in this kind of rhythm where while the enemy, the aggressor, the zombie, whatever, is swinging at you, you're just going to go left, swing, right, swing, left, swing, right, swing, etc. The number of swings that an enemy will attempt are varied. If it's got 2 arms, it's more likely to try and swing once and then the other with the other arm. If it's got only 1 arm, it's more than likely going to just swing once, take a second, and then try and swing again. This means that you can't always predict exactly how many swings are coming up. Some enemies will throw in 3 occasionally just to throw you off. And this poses a little bit of challenge for the player. You can't get too cocky and just expect 1 swing before you start attacking back. Because if you start swinging while another swing's coming in, you're the one that's going to take damage. Might sound a little weird, like it's the sort of thing that you might expect in a boxing game, not necessarily in the Callisto protocol, spiritual successor to Dead Space, but hey, it is what it is. It's a system. The problem is that as soon as there are 2 targets, You are directionally holding one side or the other relative to a certain target. And if that second enemy comes in from your side and causes you to dodge because you were already holding one way and you didn't realize, and then the first enemy starts coming at you, but you've dodged despite not wanting to dodge the other enemy that you didn't know was there, then you need to change the direction that you're holding in. But then also at this point, your player will have focused on the other enemy. You can't switch between. There is no toggle. You just have to target whoever the game decides you're going to target. And this means that if you really want to be fighting the first enemy first, you're going to be trying to pull your camera, pulling towards that first enemy, trying to essentially resist the gravitational pull of wherever the hell the game wants you to be in order to pivot to where you want to be instead. And this isn't a one-time thing. This isn't a focused pull and then, okay, I'll just deal with that and then I can switch back. It's through the entire game. You've already got this combat system that's really weirdly simplistic. Left, right, left, right. No matter how big the enemy, left, right, left, right. Doesn't matter if you're fighting Grey Hulk, left, right. But you have this layer on top of actually, I'm fighting against the camera, and it's not even necessarily the camera, it's just the targeting. I'm convinced a switch target button, just let me click my right analog stick in to change targets, please. That would do so much to make this combat feel at least a little bit more bearable, because as it stands, it is not a question of skill. This is a mistake that I think I've seen a lot of viewers making in response to a lot of video reviews that have been posted by various outlets. People are very quick to say, oh, you work for IGN or Games Radar or whatever, you must just suck at video games if you're saying it's hard. But it's not that it's hard because it requires a high skill level. It's hard because the game is constantly fighting against you in your attempts to do what the game wants. There's nothing involved here associated with flawed precision from the player or poor choices or bad strategy. Literally none of that is the case. The problem that people are having is that the combat system doesn't let you combat the enemies. And to be clear, I got through the entire game and never came out of an encounter going, man, that was really hard, but I felt myself getting better with every new try. And then when I finally did it, I had a sense of accomplishment that I had improved at the game and I had exceeded the skill threshold needed in order to move forwards. Instead, in every difficult encounter, I got to the end and went, oh, thank God this time the camera worked correctly and the targeting worked correctly. I didn't have to try and sort of pull myself and twist away from that gravitational field just so I could run off for a second and maybe loot something or grab some ammo or whatever. Like instead of accomplishment, I was feeling like the game finally let me do what I was trying to do in that particular instance of me beating a boss or whatever. And that's the last feeling you want to leave a player with when they exit a combat encounter. And it's actually tragic, this, because when you do hit enemies with your little stun baton, it feels really good. Something that they did actually get right here. I know it's going to be rare to say that in this video, but it feels really satisfying to basically baseball bat an enemy across a room with your heavy attack. There's a crunch to it. There's a feeling of force and of weight. The animation feels really good. The timing of it all, oh, it just makes you want to just keep bonking all the enemies around you over and over and over again. You want to just keep batting away. But the problem is that as soon as you get that idea into your head, you realize, well, I can't actually. Instead, I have to just dodge left, dodge right, dodge left. And then I can do my little combo and fire off my shot. And for the first half of the game, that's basically how you take stuff down. The guns aren't super effective at actually killing anything. But you get to a point in the game where zombies will sprout tentacles and start mutating, and you need to shoot them in the tentacles in order to prevent the mutation, or they basically turn into a stronger version of themselves and they're really annoying to take down. That sounds like a perfectly reasonable mechanic, except for the fact that you can hardly aim at the tentacles because half the time the game is pulling you in all these weird wonky directions and aiming at other stuff. Like the game might have decided you're going to track a zombie here and there's another zombie over here that's mutating. But because you have to tunnel vision on this zombie and the game won't let you break free of the pull, you're like trying to twist away and it's like, no, you must look over there. You can't just quickly zip over, snap a few shots off, take out the mutating one and then snap back. Like there's just all this resistance in the system. There's friction at all times between what the player wants to do and what the game permits. So it was already a bit annoying before the tentacles, and then the tentacles come in and there's just a new layer of, oh yeah, this is actually quite annoying that it's working this way. And then you get your first mini boss. And oh my God, this is one of the worst boss encounters I've really ever experienced in a game. And that's because the boss in that moment is not the creature in front of you, the big sprawling beast that you need to take down. No, the boss is the game's systems, once again, fighting against you. So with this particular boss, it's going to lunge at you, it's going to swipe at you, it's going to do all the things that all the enemies in the game do, and you can't hit this one. You just need to shoot it to take it down. The problem is that because it has a large amount of health, and the health is not the issue here, okay? But because it has more health, you need to switch weapons to make use of all the ammunition that you've got in order to take it down and get to the various damage gates. But switching weapons takes about 4 seconds. And in order to switch weapons, you need to press buttons on the D-pad. Now, in case you've forgotten, the combat system in the game relies on the left analog stick. So you are constantly going left, right, dodging the swings of this boss. But then you're also going, ooh, I need to switch weapon here. Let me quickly use the quick switch to go to another weapon without selecting it from the sort of weapon wheel. That sounds like a good idea. Nice and quick, I'll get what I want fast. So you take your thumb off the analog stick to go to the D-pad. Oh, the boss is swinging at you. Never mind. You go back to the analog stick. Then you're like, okay, maybe if I just pull away from this view that's fixed on the boss over here, and I'll just really try and sort of unroot myself and run off for a second so that I can just use the weapon wheel. You do that by pressing on the D-pad and then tabbing through to the gun that you want. Once you select the gun, your character, Jacob, will then start going, okay, the gun's in my pants here somewhere. Just give me a second, I'll pull it out. All right, yep, I've got it. Now, it's awkward because I need to sort of reconstruct the gun for some reason every time I grab the damn thing. So let me just fiddle. Oh, is that the boss attacking you again? The animation to change weapons got interrupted. You still have the empty weapon that you started with in your hands now. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. The fact that you get interrupted mid-construction of another gun, and then you can instantly get access to the original gun, but the game refuses to give you instant access to the new gun when you ask for it, is pointless. The fact that there is a delay there does not constructively add to the combat in any way. And the cherry on the cake is that once you finish fiddling with this little contraption in front of you, maybe while attempting to avoid having to dodge the boss, you finish fiddling, and then, oh, yeah, the last time you switched away from the weapon, you had no ammo, and now you do have ammo for it, but that means you need to reload the gun. So you've got more fiddling to do. And the reload is much less of a big deal. Like, it just takes a second, maybe 2 seconds to get through it. But in that time, you are there, essentially helpless and just waiting, still waiting for something that realistically could have happened in 0 seconds and would have completely made your life easier while also not affecting your immersion at all. Oh no, I picked up ammo for a gun that I had stowed, and then when I pulled it out, I didn't have to reload. Is that a really big deal? And if it is, okay, but get rid of the, oh, I better just slowly pull my gun out then, to account for the fact that you want there to be some kind of delay, and that's the reload animation, but you don't want to completely ruin the player's flow, and that's the fighting to try and find a window where the pull-out animation can complete. It sucks ass. And on top of all of that, in that boss fight, right, you're fighting against this big meaty creature. The whole time, you can avoid every single attack that it's capable of if you just go left, right, left, right. And I think you'll find that even the most stereotypical video game reviewer that's bad at video games is capable of just going left, right, like this throughout whatever kind of combat encounter they're doing. And so that is not the issue, okay? The issue is that there are other systems at work in the game, like the animation cancels, that make it hard because what the game needs you to do sucks. It isn't fun. It isn't something that you're meant to get good at in the game. It's just you fighting against the game's systems. That's the true boss in all of these encounters, in order to let you finally do what you want, which is to just pull a gun out and shoot the damn boss. I think it really takes away from the fear of those encounters as well, that you can just go, missed me, missed me, missed me, missed me indefinitely. Like, why would I be scared of an enemy that takes this much work in order to beat? Like, that's all I have to do. Suddenly I'm not scared anymore. You think that there's some kind of scary foe in the game, a certain zombie that's so terrifying that I'm just going to be shaken to my very core, but I can completely negate its entire existence and anything scary about it and any risk to myself by doing what I'm doing with my left hand right now, you're out of your mind. There's no way I'm going to be scared of that. There's no way that I'm going to fear its power. It's been beaten by an analog stick. So combat-wise, boss encounters, they suck in this game. There are also a few mini-boss encounters that are recycled in very quick succession in the second half of the game. Now, I'm counting mini-bosses and bosses together here in the kind of boss section. But the mini-boss encounter that happens maybe halfway through the game and then is repeated about 3 or 4 times before you get to the main final boss is also repeated in such a way that it doesn't feel like, oh, I'm seeing that special enemy again, and it's in a new environment, so I need to think differently about how I take it down, or it's in a different context, or in the narrative maybe, I'm learning more about them, and so I've got more of an understanding of its weak points, or why it exists, or anything like that. No. These mini-boss encounters are only frustrating. That's all they serve to do, is just exhaust you and to break your immersion. And it means that half the time you're in the encounter, there's some other thing in the space, maybe a single zombie. And that becomes the thing that you're worried about, because that zombie might end up behind you, and then you know that you're gonna have to deal with this awful, weird camera targeting system, and that's gonna be the death of you. Not the boss, not even just the zombie, but the void in between of, oh, I've got to switch targets now? That's gonna be the death of me. Might as well restart. I truly hated all of those mini-boss encounters. I wish I could have that time of my life back. I learned nothing from them. I experienced nothing positive from them. I didn't feel accomplished in them. It just felt like a waste. A couple of other combat-related things here. Healing is an interesting one. There's healing gel in the game. That's fine. You just find it. It automatically heals you when you pick it up. And there are also these health injectors where you have to actually crouch down, inject it into your neck, and it'll give you a couple of extra hits worth of health back. But that animation is slow. Like, you really have to sit there for a minute and do it. And so you definitely cannot do that during a combat encounter. And personally, I didn't think that was an issue. Like, I'm fine with the idea of being in a fight and being on low health and just having to deal with that. And quite often, actually, I was killing enemies and hoping that they would drop health gel so that I could instantly get the health back, and it was satisfying when I did get it, and if I didn't and I got credits instead, it was just like, fair enough, I have to make do with what I've got. But I have seen some people saying that in a game where you feel like you're being unfairly punished, it would be nice to have some kind of other system, like in any combat encounter. It would be nice to have a system where you could heal faster, just so that you could kind of fight against the unfairness. Now, personally, I think that you've got to address the root of the problem, and having an instant heal would kind of put a band-aid on things and also remove a lot of tension. But I wanted to mention it as a point regardless, because I have seen it discussed online. I also think it's worth talking about the HUD. So following in the footsteps of Dead Space, the game uses a HUD which is entirely displayed and conveyed within your player character's model. So you see how much ammo you have on your gun by holding up the gun, and it has a little number on it. You know how much health you have because you've got a little chip in the back of your neck with a color on it and a couple of pips that tell you how much health you've got. And there's a little battery back there as well, and that indicates the charge on your grip glove, which is essentially like the Force just from a glove. The problem is that in Dead Space, that system was completely revolutionary for the industry, or at least it was as far as I was aware. People were enamored by the thing, and it always gave you the information you needed instantly. You didn't have to go, ooh, I'm at the wrong point in my animation here, and so I can't see how much health I have. In this game, that genuinely happens, because you're dodging by twisting and turning and twisting, and obviously your gun is not out like this the entire time, so you can see the number on it. So maybe you twist down, but then, don't know how much ammo I've got now. Literally no idea. And as you twist up, how many charges do I have left in the grip? No clue. And to actually expand that little battery icon and see it fully, you need to ADS. But maybe you're not at a point where you can ADS. Okay, you're just not able to see how many charges you have left. Like, you just can't do it. And it's a real shame, because a diegetic HUD works so well in theory for this game. It's meant to be immersive. It's meant to be completely encapsulating. You're not meant to be focused on little numbers on the sides of your screen. You're meant to be in the moment, locked into that scary corridor. And so just having a character that happens to have a light on their neck, giving you all the info you need to know, sounds like a dream. But in Dead Space, that served the player. In this game, it's there in spite of the player. It's like, well, we know that there is someone that needs this information, but we want the game to look a certain way, so we're going to do it like this. But it's not serving your needs. It's just out of the way and awkward. And you're like, well, I mean, I guess it's alright. Like, not seeing exactly how much ammo I have at a given time isn't really the end of the world. But surely there was a way to keep it diegetic, but just make it better executed than it is in the game right now. In terms of enemy types, I think it's fairly limited, but I also don't really think that's a problem because it is a fairly short game. You basically have zombies, then you have zombies that can transform, doing the tentacle thing I mentioned before, and then you've got one or two sort of special enemies, like one type that's a zombie but it spits at you, another that crawls around and it explodes, and another that is blind, and so it completely relies on its hearing in order to be able to find you. And it's the blind zombie that, when it's introduced, creates the biggest moment of, oh, maybe I need to change the way I play the game now in order to account for a new enemy type, which is a good thing, to be clear. That was a massive relief. You fall into this dungeon thing, they're there, the way that the game explains how they works pretty well, it's done through gameplay, I enjoyed that aspect of things, but the problem is that I completely ignored the game's advice and just went, well, I'm actually powerful enough with this little force glove that I've got to just throw all of these blind zombies at the spikes as soon as they alert to my presence. And that insta-kills them. So I'm just gonna do that. I had maybe 8 or 9 charges on the glove at this point. So if an area had 8 or 9 zombies in it, all I would do is just walk around throwing them at the walls, and then I'd have cleared the encounter out. Is that my fault as a player for doing something that in theory meant that I had less fun than the designer might have intended in giving me a new challenge to try and overcome? Because I, as a player, took a shorter path that was significantly easier, significantly less tedious, and meant I could dodge the annoying, awkward combat system, and so meant that I didn't hate the game more having got through it. Personally, I don't think I'm to blame there. And I think that had the combat system been really enjoyable, I probably wouldn't have thrown them all at the wall. Like, I would have been more drawn to the idea of bonking them all around, doing my heavy swings. Like, that was nice when I was hitting them, but because of all the extra stress in that system, I never wanted to do it. And I think that's actually another thing they got wrong with the combat in this. There are spikes in basically every single room. And so at nearly all times, there are very few examples I can think of where this wasn't the case. I could just pick up whatever enemy was in front of me and throw it at the spikes. That was it. And I purposefully built that class. Like, I upgraded the grip skill tree so that I could get faster recharges and more charges, and I could throw further and faster. And I saved up for that really carefully. So it might sound hypocritical for me to be saying, oh, it just made the game too easy, but it's not about the ease of it. It's about the fact that that was the clear outcome for the lowest friction, shortest path to success in nearly every single encounter in the game. I wish there'd been more variety there. I will say, however, I really liked throwing the zombies into the spikes. I did think that was fun. I did have a good time doing it. I just feel like I missed out on the complete experience of the game because it meant that I basically decided very deliberately to ignore the other systems that I might be able to rely on because interacting with those systems was just a pain in the ass and I couldn't be bothered to deal with that friction. Oh look, it's me from the future again, back for another little insert. So I know so far I've been very, very negative about the combat system. And the reason for that is simply that that's what I experienced when I played the game. But there are always those super vocal voices that simply say, if you don't like the combat system, it's because you're bad at using the combat system. And so I want to actually address those people a little bit in this section of the video. So if you've already left a little comment or you're seeing someone else leaving a little comment saying, well, he's just doing it wrong, that's why he doesn't like it, this is the section for you. One of the first tweets that I saw that really blew up, that discussed the weirdness of the combat system and the fact that some people actually love it, was from someone called Oify, and they tweeted saying, you can literally play Callisto Protocol like a fighting game and it works. So this is what Oify shared, and as you can see, they're using the grip glove to pull the zombie and chuck it against the wall and then pull it again and essentially stun lock it and just wail away at it until it's dead. And Jet's Fantasy responded and had a clip that was pretty much the exact same thing. Neon Dynamo responded and said, is this game crap or does it kick ass? I'm receiving a lot of mixed signals here. So clearly, for some people, these clips are completely flying in the face of all of the commentary saying the combat system is bad. Another one I wanted to share comes from someone called Drakengram. Draken shares a clip that is intended to counteract all of the narrative that you can't fight groups in the game. What they are sort of trying to demonstrate, I think, is that you can zone the enemies and you can do some crowd control on them using various parts of your kit. So you could, for example, use your pistol to temporarily stagger an enemy and then grip another, throw it across the room so that you aren't fighting a group anymore. You're actually just fighting one enemy while the other one walks back towards you. Like, in theory, those zoning and crowd control techniques mean that you can apply the game's one-on-one combat system in an effective manner, and it's still fun. And it's also something that requires maybe more skill in order to be able to do that management of the play space around you. And Sector 30 responded to Drakkengram here and said, so where's the horror exactly? Where's the story? Where's the exploration? I'm happy people can work around a wonky system, but it doesn't make the game better. And Drakkengram quite poetically responded saying, the horror is in my hands. It's called Stun Baton. Exploring the face of my enemies, it tells a story of violence. And that's a lovely tweet. And I am so happy that Drakkengram is having this much fun with the game, but I think that in this instance, all of those people saying, if you don't like it, you're bad, and the group combat system works perfectly fine, you just have to zone effectively, and it's a skill issue, not a design issue, those people need to recognize the fact that this game is trying to be one thing, and all of those explanations and all of those workarounds are examples of the game being something completely different to that original vision. Like, it's quaint when someone asks, where's the exploration, to say, the horror's in my hands, buddy, and I'm exploring the enemy's faces. Like, it's a quaint thing to say, but it doesn't get around the fact that exploration in the game is very, very limited, and we'll get onto that in a second. It also doesn't, I think, excuse the fact that a lot of the time, those issues you're facing with the camera feel present no matter how you're trying to play, whether you're trying to zone completely, like I did a lot of the time using my grip, or whether you're doing a combination, or you're just more focused on the baton only. The fact that I can animation lock certain enemies against the wall does not make me feel like the horror game that I'm playing has any tension to it whatsoever. It makes me feel like the enemies are pointless. They are 30 seconds of broken animations away from just being dead. There is no thrill there, there is no threat there. And the enjoyment that you get out of a game which typically would be a kind of button masher, or it's a hack and slasher or something like that. I mean, it's a Street Fighter, it's a Tekken even. Those situations where you're creating combos that do stun lock your enemies and you can take them from 100 to 0 health in just a few short moves. Those games are designed with that encounter at its very core. Like in, I don't know, I'm just going to take a random example, Smash. You being able to chain a bunch of moves together to do an insane amount of damage and completely prevent your opponent from responding is fun because it feels earned. You've accrued all of these skills and you've applied them in the moment in real time against a real player. And so when your fist is going through someone's face again and again in Tekken or whatever, and they're bouncing up and down off the floor and you just keep that combo going, it feels like everything that you worked towards in the game has paid off. But in Callisto, it doesn't feel like you've earned any of that, nor does it feel like it's deserved, nor does it feel like it's what the game even wants you to be doing. I think that it's totally valid for people to say, well, it doesn't matter what the game wants. If people just pick it up and realize they can play it a certain way and they find that fun, then there's no issue there. And I think that that's true to an extent. But you can't blame people who go in hoping that the game is going to be the thing that it's been marketed to be, and that the design systems in the game, in the beginning, in the tutorials, tell you that it is. And then when they play the game that way, and it responds like crap, and it wastes your time, and it makes you feel like it's sluggish, and it's resisting your motion all the time, and you're fighting the camera, you can't tell those people that those feelings are invalid because they're not skilled enough. I'm delighted people are finding a way to enjoy the combat. I'm delighted that there is room within the sandbox for viable strategies to start emerging. But I personally don't think that those strategies and the way that you execute them feel aligned with the DNA of what Callisto was designed and intended to be and released and marketed as. We'll talk more about horror in a moment, but in my mind, this particular way of playing the game and getting around the wonky combat system isn't really redeeming. And on the topic, actually, of choosing the shortest and easiest path, I think it's about time we talked about gameplay. Before posting this video, I made a sponsored, just to be very clear about disclosure here, mini review of the Callisto protocol and posted it on TikTok. You should follow me on there. And in it, I said one of my complaints with the gameplay was that it was too linear. And I got a reply, which I think was fair, saying, why is linear a bad thing? Like, linear games are fun. So I want to clarify a little bit here why I think that in the Callisto protocol, it really doesn't work. You see, there are plenty of games that are pretty much on rails the entire time, and they work. They're scary, they really achieve their goals, they work really well. An example I can think of off the top of my head is Layers of Fear. I feel like I remember playing Layers of Fear 2 on stream once, and you were basically just funneled through the experience the entire time. There wasn't too much of, oh, I could do this, or I could do that. Oh, I've got a dialogue option. Oh, an optional side quest. Oh, maybe a second ending that I can unlock. Like, I wasn't focused on those things. I was just focused on moving through a scary world, and then at the end of it being like, oh, nice, I did it. The Callisto protocol could be that kind of game, but it sort of baits you into thinking it's not. And I think that's where a lot of the frustration of the linearity comes from. You see, when you start playing, you notice that the world feels like it's fairly open, and your little video game gremlin in your head starts kicking in, or at least mine does, saying, oh, go down that other corridor that's there, because you know it's not the main quest, so it's gonna have some goodies at the end for you to find. Or maybe it's gonna have some kind of interesting info just about the world, or something. So you go down that little corridor, and what do you find? It's actually just blocked with rubble, and there's pretty much nothing there. Or maybe there's a box which gives you 3 hand cannon ammo. Okay, maybe the next one will be better. So you keep on moving, and then, oh, you notice that you've got a branching path. You could go left or right, and you try in your head to figure out which one's the main quest one. Well, okay, one of these tunnels is lit up, while the other one is dark. So the dark one's probably optional, and the lit one is probably where they want me to go. So you go down the dark tunnel, and oh yeah, it's rubble again. So you do it again. And this time, there is some stuff there, but the stuff that you're finding is just a bunch more enemies. And once you take them all out, you find an audio log on the table. Okay, fair enough. And you find a few of those small little crates that you can break to get 3 hand cannon ammo. Fine, you think to yourself. At some point, there'll be something special down one of these, and it'll make that exploration worth it. And so you do it and do it and do it through the whole game, and consistently, every single time, you're disappointed. And I think that that's worse than if you did have to go on an exact predefined course the entire time, because it's dangling freedom in front of your nose, but not letting you taste it. It's giving you the impression there's more there. But as soon as you try and actually grasp it, you're flung back to reality, and it's like, nah, mate, this is a video game, you idiot. Of course you can't go down all these corridors. And personally, I think it's one of the biggest kind of accidental crimes that game developers commit, because it breaks one of my fundamental rules of video games, which is that you must always respect the player's curiosity. If you're doing things in a game that hint towards there being something greater out there, something bigger, something secret, something hidden, and you get their hopes up, and then you not only don't deliver, but you never deliver in any of the instances where their hopes have been raised, you're just creating a fundamentally unsatisfying experience. It's only going to lead to frustration, because you're basically crushing the hopes and dreams of the player in real time. You're reminding them over and over again that if you had created a game that did have more depth, then that curiosity would now be reaping the benefits of the hard work that you'd put in. But instead, it's going, yeah, you thought, but no. Bring those expectations back down, buddy. And that's exactly what happened to me. I went through the entire game, and by the end, I genuinely had to start convincing myself it was a waste of my time to explore those little side areas, because I knew there wouldn't be anything there that was actually worth my exploration of them, and instead it would just make more sense for me to straight line it to the end of the game. That's never something that you should have a player thinking. You always want your player to be dwelling in your play space for as long as they want to. But instead I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna get out of here as fast as I can. What? Such a missed opportunity in my opinion. And also, I mean, don't get me started on replayability. Why would I replay the game knowing that I've already explored all those side areas and they had nothing in them? There are also no puzzles through the entire game. So even the main quest rooms are completely limited to either just killing zombies and then moving out of the room, or making you pick up a fuse from one place and placing it somewhere else. There's also like one encounter where you pull 3 levers in a room. But if that's all you got for puzzles, your video game's missing the mark, man. Like, this medium is about interactivity, and there is a really stark level of disconnect between the player and the world around them in this game. You don't feel like the prison is alive really in any way. You don't feel like it's living and breathing and If you push, it'll push back. Like, there's none of those sorts of feelings that would have been really welcome. Some real thematic gameplay influence would have been really cool. But instead, you just feel like a marble rolling down a track or something. You're pretty much a passive entity that's just doing its left, right, dodging and weaving as you kill zombies in a space that doesn't even really know you're there. When you do go around one of those optional corners and you look down and you find a corpse that maybe is an attempt at telling some kind of story of what happened there previously, and you think, oh, the zombies, when I kill them, give me loot, so I'm going to stomp on the corpse and get loot from it. Nope, doesn't work with corpses that are just placed in the world. No reason as to why is given. They just don't. So it meant that a lot of the time, I'd get into one of these optional areas, or just any area in the game actually, this applies everywhere, and I'd be trying to distinguish between things I killed and things that were already there to know which would give me loot and which wouldn't. That's just bad readability. That's bad game design in my opinion. And then on top of that, let's say you do go into one of those side areas, you do kill a bunch of enemies and loot them, but not loot the corpses that were already there. And then maybe you open a couple of lockers. That gives you a little bit more loot. You're like, hell yeah, made some good progress here. And then you turn around, leave the area and go back on the main quest, but you die straight away. The game's autosave feature at this point is gonna go, oh, you died and you were on the main quest? Okay, let's just put you back 20 minutes to before you did the optional encounter and just put you right back to the point where you decided which corridor you were going to go down. You're going to lose all of that progress of the extra room, and you're going to either have to just do it all again, which ranges from being, okay, fair enough, it'll only take me 20 seconds to absolutely the hell not. That's going to be 5 to 10 more minutes of just repeating myself. No. Or you're going to have to say, you know what? It isn't actually worth it. I'm just going to keep moving forward, pretending that that little part of the game didn't exist. Again, criminal in the court of video game design. Multiple times, I would go to an upgrade station. I would upgrade my weapon. I would wait through the 10, 15 second animation of all that happening. I would get out of the upgrade bench. I would go forwards into an encounter. Another 20, 30 seconds. I'd start an encounter. I'd be in the encounter for maybe 2 or 3 minutes, and I would die and then be brought back to before I upgraded. So I then had to spend time upgrading again before I got to try the encounter again. Dying in an encounter and being put back to the start is fine. That happens in every single game out there. What's not fine is giving me extra legwork to do when I already was in a safe environment. It should have just auto-saved the moment I did it, but for no reason at all, it didn't. And the absurdity of this goes even further, because if you finish your little upgrade and then manually save and reload that save, like straight away, you lose the upgrades. Like, the game has the worst memory in the world and simply cannot remember the fact that you just saved yourself doing that activity. So if you go off the beaten track, at some point you end up punished for it. And if you spend time putting effort and energy and thought into some of the game's other systems, like the upgrades, and then you die, oh, looks like that was just for nothing. Like, the game doesn't even want you there in the first place. And maybe that's why there's rubble at the end of most of those corridors. Like, through the entire game, you're just moving forward because a voice is telling you to, whether it's your British friend or the girl that attacked your ship. They're saying, yeah, you just gotta kind of keep moving and then we'll be able to get out. And it's like if you disobey that specific voice, the game starts going, yeah, well, yeah, no, actually, let's just only have you focus on that one thing. Because all the other fun bits and bobs that you're trying to interact with right now, yeah, no, there just isn't actually anything there. Don't worry about that stuff. Just keep dodging side to side. That's all we need of you. Don't do anything else. Just stay hypnotized. Just in a little trance here. Dodge and dodge and dodge. Oh, another thing, in case I didn't have enough already, you're opening lockers, right? You're maybe in a side area, maybe not, maybe just the path forwards, and you notice a locker that has loot in it. You open it up, but before you open it, you're like, I think that this is booby-trapped. What should your options be? Well, if you've had the thought it's booby-trapped, you should be able to dismantle the booby trap and then get the loot. Or you should be able to choose to not open that locker, or you should be able to open it and just get booby trapped. This game only presents you with the option of ignoring the locker or opening it and getting booby trapped. There's no way to outsmart the system here. And this is relevant because through the entire game, there are slugs in lockers that jump out at you randomly when you open them. And the first time this happened, fair play. It's fair game. It's a jump scare in a horror game. Acceptable. But by the 10th slug, I was looking at every locker thinking, is there going to be another slug in here? Like, seriously? Am I going to have to do the little spamming triangle thing? Yeah, get through the quick time event. Can I not outsmart the system? Can I not hold my dodge button, for example, or maybe even my block button so that when it jumps out, I block it and it's fine? Nope. Far as I found, despite the fact that I really wanted to block, I couldn't. I just had to get nibbled by the slug for a bit, over and over again. It was a pain in the ass. Another thing that gets annoying, tragically, is the death animations. Like, those are very, very much a carryover from Dead Space. In Dead Space, they were masterful. People absolutely loved them. Like, everyone wanted to find all the crazy ways that Isaac could die. And in this, there are a few that are really cool. Don't get me wrong, I think the animations are visually pretty interesting. But it's when you get in certain encounters where you feel like you die unfairly, and so you're already kind of feeling some animosity towards the game, and then it shows you the same death animation over and over again. Like, you die from one of those bosses, it's showing you the same damn animation. There are very few different options you can get there. And maybe that's okay. You know, there doesn't have to be an unbelievably large number of animations in order for the game to be good. But it's when you feel hard done by and you're like, oh, for God's sake, it's wasting my time now. You don't want to sit through the animation. And what I found myself doing is realizing that if I did die, it was faster to press pause and just restart from checkpoint. So I wouldn't see the damn animation because I just wanted to get back in there as fast as possible to waste as little of my own time as I possibly could because the game was taking it from me. Again, like the last thing you want a player to be feeling in your video game. It's that combination of unearned damage, unearned deaths, and unearned difficulty wrapped up in the lack of rewarding of the player's intrigue, curiosity, exploration, time, etc. Completely ignored the player. And I just know for a fact there's someone in the comments right now that hasn't listened this far into the video and they're saying, oh, if you didn't like the game so much, why didn't you just stop playing it after an hour or something? Or they're saying, this doesn't make any sense. I'm having a blast with the game, so it doesn't make sense for you to be saying that there's all this stuff wrong with it when it's still fun. And if you see someone saying that, please timestamp them to this point in the video, because I want to be very clear. I still recognize that there is fun to be had in the game, and I had moments of fun in the game in my own playthrough when I completed it. I'm just saying that the reason that this game is not 94 on Metacritic, and instead it's somewhere in the 70s right now, is that expectations were high prior, and then they delivered a product that was nothing really but average in most categories, with some small things that feel like it's holding it there, preventing it from getting into the really good categories or even the excellent categories. Like, you might be having a huge amount of fun with the game, and that's amazing, but you would be having even more fun if in those little corridors that you were exploring, you found some stuff that felt like it honored the time you put in to go and look there. Or if your animations stopped getting freaking interrupted all the time so you couldn't change weapon. Or another one that I forgot to mention actually at the time, when you press your quick switch, if it switched to a gun that actually had ammo, that would feel pretty good, wouldn't it? Instead, most of the time, you switch to a gun with no ammo in it. What's the point? Yeah, you can have fun in the game while that's happening, but it would be a little bit more fun if the game made your life easier while you were moving through the space. So I recognize there is still absolutely loads of fun to be had in the Callisto protocol. It's just that I can see it could be so much greater if certain decisions they made early on were different, and if certain features now in their current state were tweaked to be a little bit better for quality of life and player friendliness. And on that note, I want to talk about the opposite of player friendliness. I want to talk about horror and how this game gets horror wrong. I thought the Callisto protocol was gonna be scary. Instead, I got jump scared about 10 times that were good jump scares. And the rest of the scares in the game, well, actually, no, there weren't any. That was it. There were moments where I was like, oh, there's a zombie there, but it wasn't even really a jump scare. I didn't go, oh, like, it didn't get me that much. It just made me go, okay, my focus is over there now. That's fine. And sadly, it's unsuccessful in doing anything else horror-wise. To a point that I got to the end of the game basically feeling like it was Gears of War, like it was a third-person shooter, instead of feeling like it was a Dead Space Descendant. Like, the final couple hours of the game is just a cover shooter without cover. You see an enemy, maybe you grip it into some spikes, or you shoot it a bunch with your newly acquired AR or whatever, and then you bonk it a few times, and it's dead. And you're like, all right. And then you move on to the next one, And you just do that over and over again. And you know exactly what the enemies are because you see them from the very beginning in the game. There is no mystery as to what the enemy is. There is no kind of like alien, oh, it's scuttling around in the ship around you, but you don't know what the creature is, so you don't even know what you're scared of yet. Like that sense of complete unknown is often so horrifying. But in this game, there is no unknown. What you're scared of is a zombie. And the zombie cannot hurt you in any way as long as you're able to move an analog stick left and right. So the tension is gone. It disappears. Like, I really strongly believe that one of the reasons PT is such an incredible game, it doesn't just go for PT, Outlast as well, incredible, Amnesia, incredible, is because you don't feel like you're caught all the time. Like, once you're caught, the tension is gone. It's the build up to that. It's the build up to the moment that the game needs to drag out as long as possible to keep you in that state of maximum fear. In PT, you're constantly going through the corridor and you don't know what might or might not be around the corner or might not be behind you. And so your imagination does all the work and you're terrified. And the strings, the sounds, the little rustling, the creaking, the telephone. Oh my God, that game is horrifying. That game is just on another level of terror. I remember playing Amnesia and you're walking around, right, in that area where it's all watery and you can hear your own footsteps. And that sound is terrifying. You're playing Outlast and you know that there is a thing moving through the corridor, but you're just gonna get in this little locker and close the door and pray that you're going to be okay. In Dead Space, it's dark, you can't see a thing, you don't really know what the enemy is yet, and you've seen nothing like that in a game before. And in the rare occasions where you do have full bright lights and you can see everything super crystal clearly, it sticks its fingers into your face and pulls your eyes out or something. It's horrifying, and it's over like that, and then, yeah, buddy, you're back in the corridor, and the lights are out again, and the sound is so terrifying, and your character doesn't speak, so you're alone with your thoughts, and you just have to deal with it. In Callisto, you walk into a dark corridor, it jump scares you over and over again at the beginning of the game, so you're desensitized to it. You then start expecting jump scares in every corridor. They happen, and the big bad, the big zombie, the big thing that you're scared of at all times is a completely known quantity. So if you do see some movement in the distance, you're not like, huh, because it's just a zombie, bro. You can just baseball bat it across the room like it's calm. I think also they really missed the mark on the sound design here. I haven't got a sound design section of the video because I'm just gonna put all of my commentary on it in this section. Sound design in horror games is absolutely equal with video, in my opinion. Like, what's on screen is not scary if your sound is off. This goes for films and all other stuff as well. If the sound is just happy music and you're seeing your character getting ripped to shreds or being chased in some game, you're just not gonna care. But if it's silent and every single step that you take creaks a floorboard underneath you and you can feel your own heartbeat increasing, you can feel your breathing getting shallower as you get more scared, and then you hear something dragging at the end of the corridor, dragging against the floorboards, and it's coming towards you and it's getting louder. Bro, that is what's scary. It's sound-based. It's rooted in sound. And this game's sound design never really scared me, ever. And I'm a scaredy cat. I am so freaked out by even you play a violin near me and bro, I'm getting heart palpitations. Like, I'm not okay. But this game didn't do that once. Why? It's meant to be a scary game. Instead, it's a zombies beat 'em up. Like, what? How did that happen? If that's what they want to do, fair enough. But don't market it as a game that's going to be really scary. Just doesn't make sense to me. Maybe it tested better. Maybe they tried it out with different consumer groups and all of them were like, yeah, we like the less scary version. Maybe, but market it differently. And if you're not going to be just a scary game, then I'm going to hold you to the standard that I would apply to other games that aren't scary. Like, if the fear is gone, suddenly the lights are on and it's much more obvious if you've messed up your combat system. And that's exactly what's happened here, unfortunately. Like, I've got too much headspace unoccupied while I'm playing, so I can still think about all these things instead of just pooping myself and trying to get out of the corridors or whatever as fast as possible. It's a shame because they really missed the mark. So with all of these things in mind, we've got to bring it back to the obvious kind of elephant in the room, which is that Dead Space 1 was a Hall of Fame classic video game, and it seems like Callisto is not. Dead Space, set in a mining ship floating through space. You don't know what's going on, and this sort of psychosis is building up in your brain as you dig through all of these corridors that are broken, busted up, pitch black, and you're mining yourself in a weird way. You're mining for the truth. You're hunting for answers. You're digging through the rubble, the wreckage, for a way out. Because from the very beginning of the game, you know it's reinforcing in your brain that the diamond in the rough is out there. You just need to search hard enough and psych yourself up enough to be able to find it. In contrast, in the Callisto protocol, you're in jail. Your jailer is the game's combat system, who's really damn harsh on you, and the shackles around your ankles are the one-way corridors leading to either nothing or just another zombie. Your curiosity, which starts off bubbling away as it does in any other game, is told to actually just hold on, or maybe don't do that, or maybe just do what we want you to do what we're telling you to do, and just hold that analog stick left, and then hold it right, and left, and right. Marching forwards through the game in a straight line, because that's the only way you're gonna actually get anywhere. After all, you, the player, are in jail just as much as Jacob is. The difference being that this is one you can't escape from. If you disagree with any of this video, I'm super curious to hear your thoughts in the comments. Please do drop a comment down there. Let's start the discussion, and hopefully Striking Distance can use this to better understand some of the community's kind of anger towards the game right now, and start working on quality of life improvements and patches that are going to make us all happier campers in the future. If you liked the video, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.